unto the Lord this morning. We're going to do a short Sunday school review coming from lesson 2. Subject is living as God's just people. Bible truth said we should love our neighbors as we do ourselves. And as I was reading and studying this passage, it occurred to me that this Sunday school lesson goes completely in contrast to what society says. We're living in a time now where everybody's trying to get an advantage. Everybody trying to get one up on everybody else. And so you have found that as saints, we have took on some of the characteristics of the world. We talk good, talk about the Lord, talk about the word, talk about prayer, talk about fasting. But unfortunately, we don't practice as much as we talk about it. Somebody can cough up an amen. If you listen to the saints and their testimonies, you think they number one. But if you watch their actions, you find gaps. You know, we most of us been in church, around church a long time. We come, we study these scriptures and have Bible study. We talk about a lot of stuff. But we have to measure our actions against our words. And that's a personal thing. We can try to justify our actions. I deserve it because of this. They cheated me out of that. But at the end of the day, the word of God is going to stand. We look at this passage coming from the book of Leviticus, known as the book of the law, coming from chapter 19, verses 9 through 18. And it speaks primarily about how we should treat others. And how many would say that we treat others as we want to be treated as a general rule? Most of the time, we're treating others to make sure that I get one up. In this passage, it starts by telling us that we're talking about principles. And principles are something that holds true regardless of circumstances, situation, or conditions. They don't change. So when you start talking about principles, they're not conditional. They're principles. And if we can learn to live by these principles, I just believe that from a godless standpoint, your success will be greater than it will be otherwise. Now, from a worldly standpoint, it may not be. But the question is, are you trying to live according to the world, or are you trying to live according to the word? And there are conflicts all the time. So when we find this passage here, we find that, the famous saying, love thy neighbor as oneself, and we can often quote that and talk about that. But again, the question is our actions versus the word. Just a couple of highlights. When in this short few scriptures, we'll find that the Lord gives us instructions, and he often ends it with, I am the Lord your God. In other words, he is putting his signature, if you allow me to put it that way. He has validated his word by who he is. And so we find he starts talking about when you reap the harvest. And most of us are not real farmers in the sense that they were. This was a major part of their livelihood and society as a whole. They would go out and they would harvest their crops, and a person that's trying to consume everything would get everything. But he was telling them that you don't gather everything. You leave something for the gleaners. You leave something for the poor. You leave something for those that are less fortunate, those that don't have land, those that don't have crops. Leave something for them. Now, somebody tell me, what does that look like today? Somebody say, I don't have a garden. And if I did and left it in there, ain't nobody coming around to glean anyway, so it just sat out there and rot. So what does that look like today? When it says, leave something for the gleaners. It means that you do share. If you ain't gonna harvest, I was watching a funny the other day, and this guy pulled up to a fast food restaurant, and he ordered his food, and he got ready to pay for it. And the person at the window said that the person before you paid for it. I said, wow, that's great. That's wonderful. He said, he looked to try to see who it was, to see if he recognized. He couldn't recognize who it was, Sister Myra. So he said, I'm going to do the same thing for the person that's behind me. He said, how much is it? He said, $200 and some dollars. He started looking behind him, trying to see what was behind him. Yes, there's a bus. There's a herd of kids. He said, how much you say it was? 200, and price didn't change. And he kept asking, how much was it? Hoping that the number would change. And I don't know. I've done that sometimes, and drove up to a place and said, I'm paying for mine. I'm paying for the person behind me. I've done some things like that. And I've never gotten shocked with a 200 and some at a drive-through. I may have gotten it somewhere else, but not at the drive-through. But the reality is that if the Lord puts that on your heart, you just do it. So he just tells them, he says, I want you to treat your neighbor as yourself. If there are people that's less fortunate than you, and if you look at it and you think about that, no matter what status wherever you are, you could say, I barely got enough to get along, but there's still somebody less fortunate than you. And it goes back to, you want to harvest from what you plant. So if you plant blessings, blessings coming back your way. And if you're one of these people that's always poor mouthing, always don't have enough, always and never plant anything, then what you end up doing, perpetuating your current state. He goes on to say, thou shalt not glean thy vineyard. This was a very popular part of their existence, to gather the grapes and make wine. And you know that the more you gathered, the more wine you made, or the more you harvest, the more food you had. But he said, leave some for the poor and the stranger. Now he went from the gleaners, which would be kind of the poor. And now in this verse 10, he introduced strangers. These are people you don't even know. Tell you not to steal, nor deal falsely, neither lie one to another. And I'm going to hit this just a little bit, because the reality is, it's easy to lie. Let me say that again. It's easy to lie. And sometimes we don't just tell a lie. We act a lie. But a lie is still a lie. And the Bible said a liar won't tarry. Y'all know what it says. He said, and do not swear by my name falsely, neither shall thou profane the name of thy God. I heard somebody say something about, what was yesterday? I heard somebody say that People don't serve him, but as soon as they get in trouble or they use his name in vain. He went on to talk about defrauding our neighbor, rob him, wages, people work for you, and all those type things. And he talks about do not curse to death, nor put a stumbling block before the blind, for thou shalt fear thy God. He talks about being fair in business. And I know a lot of times if you go, you bargain hunters, y'all go to garage sales and places like that, you just to be fair. Understanding that if you dealing with a vendor, they can't lose on every deal and stay in business. Just like a person working can't work for free. You to be fair. Be fair with them. He goes on and again, he goes through these, I don't know, it's I guess about 8 or 9 things that he talking about being fair. But the reality is this could have been a book full of stuff that we need to be fair about. We need to pause. And they had a saying a few years ago about what would Jesus do? It sounded good, made good. People made a lot of money off the little signs, maybe even T-shirts and little bracelets and all kind of stuff. That didn't necessarily mean they were doing it. They just found a good way to make some money. So it's important for us to pause, and as we as we review our actions, it's important to put ourselves in the flip side of transactions. How would I feel on the other side of this? Would I be comfortable with this, or would I want something different? And that's a good way to measure that, because if you would accept the deal on the other side, then it may be fair. But it shouldn't always be one way. I tell people this. I said in business, I try to do it like this. I said it can't be I lose, you win all the time, or you lose, I win all the time. Sometimes you got to compromise. And I know many of us work on, many of you rather, work on these jobs, and you deal with this all the time. You deal with people trying to up the game. You deal with people trying to figure out a way to, what's the word? Get around the game, trying to get around the rules. Y'all know what I'm talking about. And so what you want to be seen as that person to say, I'm going to be fair. I'm gonna get you everything I can get you being fair. I don't want to cheat you, but I also got a responsibility for whoever I work for. I got a responsibility to them as well. And so I have to balance those things, because the reality is that a lot of times even corporations may tell you they have plaques and say that they're fair, but if you're in the bowels of it, let me leave that alone. So what you don't want to do is you want to get caught up in that culture, and all of a sudden you become part of the culture of being like the sign saying one thing, doing something else. So if you think about it, we are now a culture of that. Church say one thing, people do something else. Corporations say one thing, they do something. We don't want to be caught saying one thing, doing something different. And he goes on to start talking about strangers. He talks about foreigners, talks about all of these things. And Jesus summed it all up in Matthew when he said, in Luke, in Matthew 28:38 through 39, Luke 10 and 27, where he said, love thy neighbor as thyself. And I would say that if marriages took on that position, we'd have a lot more successful marriages. If business people took on that position, we'd have a lot more successful businesses. And I'm gonna say this, for a lot of people that's working in the work environment, if we took on that position, we would be more successful. Sometimes look, I know sometimes it's you find yourself in that spot that you could tell a little something or leave a little something off, and it looked like you get you an advantage. But what it does is stains your character. And people then gonna start figuring they the first lady have this saying said, if I'm out there and I say I'm a surgeon, I'm a world renowned surgeon, but you come by my house and I'm digging a ditch, and then a few days go by and you say I'm a renowned surgeon, you come by my house and I'm digging a ditch, you see that 3 or 4 times, what you gonna decide? I'm a ditch digger. And so it's the same thing when you dealing with people. If you say I'm saved, sanctified, fire baptized, and Holy Ghost filled, you lying, cheating, and stealing. I know that's harsh. And then the next time they deal with you lying, cheating, and stealing, and the next time they're gonna say, you're a ditch digger. So look, I want to encourage us that in this season where it looks like society is because if you think about what's happening in our society, there's so many false narratives where people just lie, and everybody know it's a lie, and then other people line up behind it knowing it's a lie, and it's like, yeah, fake news and all this other crazy stuff, and it's like everybody know it's not true, but it gets momentum because people want to support it. Why? Because they get an if that lie goes out, it gets an advantage. And I heard somebody say it's ain't biblical. Say they said a lie can get up and go around the world several times while the truth trying to put his shoes on or something. Y'all heard something like that? So people almost are intrigued by the line. They are, it's like it becomes news that a lie was told, and then people gravitate to that. Isn't that crazy? It's like, what happened to truth? What happened to the validity and the importance of truth? But we know God is true and his word is true. And so for us, how we operate on a regular basis, it dictates our character. And character is, what do you do when nobody else is around, right? But if we really gonna say we saved, sanctified, fire baptized, Holy Ghost filled, then we have to take on the nature of God. We got to take on the characteristics of God, and then we got to walk according to the word, even when it hurts. I'm closing, but you know what I found? I found that we find ourselves sometimes tempted in those situations where you could lie. And sometimes, like I said, sometimes you lie by verbally, sometimes by action, sometimes by silence. But there are many ways to lie. And so what I found is that if you stick with the truth, just stay with it. Sometimes it seems like it hurts in the moment, but God is going to be glorified. And I promise you, you're going to be better off on the backside. Let me say that again. Sometimes it looks like if I tell this lie now, I'm going to get an advantage. If I act a lie, it looks like I'm going to get an advantage. But I promise you, you're going to be better off if you just tell the truth. It is what it is. I'm a witness to that. And sometimes it may look like it cost me something. But when you look back after a while, you figure out, yeah, it did cost me something. But God's reward was greater than what it cost me as time goes on. Let me say this in my closing. The same thing with a lie. It costs you, but you may not understand what it costs you in time. Can I say that again? It's going to cost you. You just don't know what it costs you in time. You know where you landed, but you don't have a clue where you would have landed if you just been truthful. So let us be guilty of being a blessing to others that are less fortunate. And look, it's challenging because we have a society now that let me see how to say it. We have a hustling society. Is that right? Can I say it that way? We want the easy way. The other day I was somewhere, my kids planted some potatoes and called me. I looked at Google that they planted the potatoes in one of my little boxes I got there. And the other day I had my grandkids out there and we went digging potatoes. And what you find, you plant one, you harvest many. But let me tell you this, you don't plant potatoes and expect to get turnips. Somebody gonna get that later, mother. Whatever you plant, that's what you're gonna harvest. So let us be guilty. We have the world is looking for people to be real. He's looking for people to be truthful, looking for people to be honest. So God bless you in our review.